We're doing a deep dive today on something that, we see all this hurricane damage, right?
Yeah,
And it's scary stuff, but we don't always think about what comes next.
right.
Like what happens after the floodwaters recede.
Yeah, yeah.
This article we have, it's about mold risk after Hurricane Milton. And let me tell you, it was a real eye-opener. Mold.
Yeah, and what's so interesting about this is it's not just a Florida problem or, even just a hurricane problem.
Right.
This is something that, if you've been through heavy rain, flooding, any of that, it's something to think about.
Yeah, because the article mentions that mold can start growing in less than 48 hours after things get wet. 48 hours.
Wow.
You're barely figuring out the insurance and bam, you've got another problem brewing. And all that rain from the hurricanes, are you kidding me? It's like you're setting out a buffet.
It really is.
For mold. And here's where it gets even more interesting, I think, is that it's not just the mega storms, the big hurricanes we need to worry about.
Okay.
Climate change is making even what we think of as ordinary rainfall more intense.
Yeah.
Just think about those like hot, muggy summer days. That's warmer air that's able to hold more moisture.
Oh, okay.
So now, expand that, put that on a larger scale.
Yeah.
You've got heavier downpours, and you've got perfect conditions for mold.
So even if you're not, in a hurricane zone, this is relevant.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And this quote from the article, it just really struck me. It's a Harvard scientist, Mary Johnson, and she says that mold is absolutely associated with climate change.
Wow.
It's a statement.
It is, and it highlights something, and we often focus on those immediate impacts of climate change, but the long-term effects on our homes, on our health,
Right.
those can be just as significant. We have to think about that.
Absolutely. And what really struck me? They talk about this research at FSU, and they're finding over 40 types of mold in homes after hurricanes. 40. I can name like 3. And they're using machine learning to analyze it all, which tells you just how complex this problem is becoming.
Yeah, there's research being done by Ibrahim Ahmadiyya Sharaf, and it really shows you this is ongoing, this research. This is a big deal, And what they're finding is it's not just the big hurricanes, but also these chains of smaller rainfall events.
Okay.
And those can be just as much of a breeding ground for mold, especially inside our homes.
Okay, so that's a little unnerving, right? Because we've always had rain. But now it's like, oh, is this a ticking time bomb for mold?
I can see why you'd feel that way, yeah. I mean, with all this, it's easy to think of mold as like, the enemy, but it's not always a bad thing.
Right.
It's been around forever, like millions of years, and it's really important for the natural world.
Yeah, like that whole breaking down organic matter, cleaning things up.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So outdoors, it's our friend.
Yeah.
Helping decompose leaves, dead trees, all that, but bring that inside. Whole different story.
So it's all about context, really.
Exactly. Outdoors friend.
Yeah.
Inside our homes, potential health hazard.
Okay, got it.
And when we're talking about health hazards, there are certain groups that are, more vulnerable.
Yeah, the article mentioned young children,
Right.
people with allergies, asthma, anyone with a compromised immune system.
Yeah, if you've had an organ transplant,
Right.
you're undergoing chemo, your body's already working so hard.
Right.
Right. So those individuals, they're much more susceptible to infections.
Right.
And mold exposure can make that even worse.
Yeah.
And, we can't forget older adults either.
Oh, right. Especially in a place like Florida.
Exactly. A lot of seniors. And as we age, our immune systems naturally weaken.
Makes sense.
So again, that vulnerability to the effects of mold is just something to keep in mind.
Okay, so we've established mold can be a health risk. But let's talk about, I think it's the one everyone think about, black mold. Dun, dun, dun. Like, it's got this almost mythical bad reputation. How dangerous are we really talking?
Yeah, black mold has got that ring to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
And, it's true that black mold, or Stachybotrys chartarum,
Oh, wow.
that's the fancy scientific name. So Stachybotrys chartarum, it can produce toxins,
Okay.
and those are harmful.
Right.
But here's the thing. It's not necessarily worse than other types of mold.
So it's not like some super mold, like, it's going to take over my house overnight.
No, not quite. The important thing to remember here is that any type of mold, it doesn't matter the color, if it's growing inside and you're exposed to it, it can be a problem.
Okay, so the color matters less than just the fact that it's there.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay. So what about sick building syndrome? That's another one I've heard, but it always seemed kind of vague.
Yeah, it is a little bit of a catch-all, right?
Right.
And to be honest, that link between mold and sick building syndrome, It's still being debated,
Okay.
by scientists, researchers. They're still trying to figure that one out. However,
Yeah.
the respiratory problems that are linked with mold, those are very real.
So we're talking like coughing, wheezing, triggering asthma attacks, things like that.
Exactly. And if you already have breathing problems, asthma, any of that,
Right.
mold can make it that much worse.
So let's say I'm listening to this and I'm like, wait a minute, I think I might have a mold problem. What's my first step? Do I need to like call a professional mold inspector immediately?
That's a great question. And this is where Dr. Ronald Saff, he's an allergist, quoted in this article. He gives some good advice. He says, start by using your senses.
Using my senses. So like if my house smells a little funky.
Yeah. Yeah, like that musty smell.
Okay.
That's often one of the first signs.
Okay.
And then visually, mold, it can look fuzzy, slimy, powdery, all sorts of things.
Okay.
And it can be black, but it can also be green, white, orange, you name it.
Huh. See, this is where I'm glad we did a deep dive on this because, I've always got that like, moldy basement smell.
Right.
But I just thought it was, a basement thing.
Yeah, well, basements do tend to be more humid. So
Right.
prime real estate for mold.
Mm.
But really, any damp area in your house, it can be a breeding ground.
Okay, so you've used your senses and you're like, yep, I've got a problem. What do you do? Hazmat suits.
For most household mold, you can actually handle it yourself.
Well, okay.
Little precaution never hurts, right?
Right.
Gloves, mask, especially if you're dealing with a larger area.
Right.
But the CDC, they have some really good recommendations. And number one, ventilation.
Yeah. So open the windows, get the fans going.
Exactly. You want that air circulating.
Okay.
Helps dry things out, which mold hates.
Right.
But, and this is important, they mentioned HVAC systems.
Oh, right, because my first thought would be to crank the AC,
Right.
dry things out even faster.
And you would think so, right?
Yeah.
But that can actually backfire big time.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Because if you're running your HVAC system and there's mold, you're basically spreading it.
Oh, like those spores.
Exactly. Those spores are like tiny little, seeds, and your HVAC system will spread them everywhere.
So until you've cleaned it up, just natural ventilation.
Exactly.
Got it. Now, cleaning it up, let me guess, bleach.
You know it. Classic
Yeah.
bleach. Dilute it with some water, though.
Yeah.
That's going to be effective on hard surfaces.
Okay.
Tiles, countertops, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Dish soap solution can also work,
Oh, okay.
but absorbent materials. So that's your carpets, upholstery, even some drywall. If it's gotten too bad, you might be looking at replacing it.
See, that's the part I don't want to hear because, especially after hurricane damage, who needs that?
I know it's not ideal, but sometimes it's the safest route because that mold, it gets in deep,
Yeah.
Hard to get rid of completely from those porous materials.
This has been really informative
Oh, good.
and kind of scary, to be honest. But it seems like there is some good news, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something the article stressed, especially thinking about people who've been through these recent hurricanes. FEMA, they might be able to help. They've got programs for, low-income homeowners, renters to deal with mold remediation.
That's huge.
Right.
Because that's got to be so expensive.
Exactly. So if you're in that situation, please reach out to FEMA, see what they can do. You don't have to go through this alone.
Wow, we've covered a lot today. Climate change, mold, practical tips, and I feel like I know so much more now, so thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Glad we could do that. But, I think beyond all the, the how-tos and everything, there's a bigger point here. Climate change. It's bringing more intense rainfall, and like we said, even those smaller events can add up. We need to be paying attention to what's happening inside our homes.
Right. It's not just something happening, out there.
Exactly. Because even subtle changes can create that perfect environment for mold.
It's a good reminder that climate change is personal. It's affecting our health, our homes, all of it. So any final thoughts for our listeners today? What's the one thing you want them to remember? Pay attention. Pay attention to your indoor environment. It's easy to overlook, but even small changes, that musty smell, a damp spot, those could be early warning signs. And with mold, early detection. It's key.
Awesome. Great advice to end on. And for our listeners, if you want to learn more, you can find tons of information on the CDC website. We'll link to that in the show notes. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay mold-free.